I squinted my eyes, leaning back as a group of beautiful women surrounded me in the Shuyua pavilion. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and the sound of soft, flirtatious giggles. One of the maids, standing behind me, massaged my shoulders with just the right amount of pressure. She leaned down and whispered into my ear, asking if I was comfortable. A small smile played on my lips. This was the life. It was incredibly relaxing. I told her it was good and promised her a reward. She beamed with joy and worked even harder. I closed my eyes, but then I realized something was off. I told her not to call me master, but to call me young master instead. She giggled and corrected herself immediately. As I sat there, I couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. Through my hard work, Taoyuan County finally had its very first brothel. I remembered when I first crossed over into this world. I was terrified. Most people who get reincarnated end up as princes or wealthy heirs, but I ended up as a dirt-poor county magistrate in a place no one cared about. It took me half a month just to understand where I was. This dynasty wasn't in any history book I knew, though the civilization felt familiar. I had arrived right in the middle of a war between the states of Qian and Jing. Taoyuan County only survived because it was so remote and rugged that the soldiers didn't bother coming here. When I took over this mess, I nearly fainted. There were barely 2,000 people left, all of them starving and skin and bones. My assistant and the local teacher had already died of hunger or fled with the refugees. There were no industries and no way to make money. I was facing a total collapse. I ignored the grumbling of the locals and put every ounce of effort into gathering enough grain to brew several vats of high-proof alcohol. Then, I ordered the villagers to go out and recruit a group of passing merchants. We got them drunk, made some deals, and finally broke the cycle of poverty. 5 years later, the state of Qin fell. Emperor Li Che of the Jing state took over with a ruthless efficiency, and the world began to stabilize. My life started looking up too. Business in Taoyuan County flourished. Over 7 years, I expanded the town multiple times, rebuilt the government office, and added gambling dens, brothels, and restaurants. By luring in refugees and bringing in outsiders, our population grew to tens of thousands. By bending and breaking quite a few laws, I turned this forgotten corner of the world into a literal paradise. I didn't want the imperial court to notice me anymore. I didn't want a promotion. I even forced the merchants I worked with to keep our location a secret. A year ago, an imperial inspector named Zhao Li stumbled upon us and called the place a miracle. He wanted to report it to the capital, but I used a few special methods to settle him down. Now, I just wanted to stay here forever as a local king. I had food, a mansion, and women. What else did I need? Just as I was soaking in the perfection of my life, someone burst into the room. It was Zhang Biao. He was an ordinary-looking guy in official robes with a saber at his waist. He rushed over and whispered that some villagers had spotted foreign merchants 10 miles out. Their carriage didn't have our protection mark. He asked if we should rob them. Do another job. I snapped. I kicked him right then and there. I yelled at him, calling him a dog. I reminded him that we were the government, not bandits. I told him we had to be professional now. How could we just kidnap people? Zhang Biao stumbled and fell to the floor in a dramatic, almost graceful heap. He looked at me piteously and muttered that this was how we always used to do it. I threatened him for talking back, but the girls around us just laughed. Everyone in Taoyuan County knew me by now. They knew I had a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. In fact, people envied Zhang Biao for being close enough to me to get kicked. Zhang Biao stood up and waited for orders. My mood was ruined, so I decided to leave. Investment was the most important thing for the county right now, and we needed to expand our business. I couldn't be careless with new merchants. I stood up and nodded to the manager of the pavilion. I told him to keep running his business well, but I warned him that if I caught him or his staff mistreating the women or breaking the law, I'd tear the whole place down. The manager broke into a cold sweat and bowed repeatedly, thanking me for my protection. I turned to Zhang Biao and told him it was time to head back to the office. Meanwhile, about half a day's journey away from the county, a carriage was bumping along a terrible road. Inside, Gua Tianyang held a map respectfully before a middle-aged man in his 40s. This was Emperor Li Che. Though he wasn't old, his face was weathered from years of war and the stress of ruling. Even though he had unified the country, natural disasters and local uprisings were constant. He had left the palace in secret to see the reality of his empire for himself. The emperor asked Guo if he had ever heard of Taoyuan County. Guo shook his head. He said the place was buried in the mountains, the roads were in disrepair, and it was likely a tiny, insignificant speck of a town. The emperor nodded and closed his eyes to rest. The only sound was the annoying, rhythmic creaking of the wooden wheels. After a while, the emperor sighed. He decided they would rest in Taoyuan County for a day because the road was so bad it was making him miserable. Guo smiled and agreed, noting that since the place was so remote, they shouldn't expect much. He expressed concern about the lack of guards, but the emperor scoffed. He told Guo he was getting old and losing his courage after years of battle. Before Guo could finish his explanation, the carriage hit a massive bump. Guo was tossed up, his head slamming into the roof. The emperor only stayed in his seat because he was gripping the handrails with all his might. He told Guo to go out and see what happened. Guo crawled out, rubbing his head, and started screaming at the driver. He called him a fool and asked if he knew how to drive. But the driver didn't say a word. He just pointed forward, trembling. Guo Tianyang's eyes went wide. He looked ahead, then looked back at the road they had just come from, then rubbed his eyes in disbelief. The road behind them was a mess of dirt, jagged rocks, and holes. But the road in front of them? It was perfectly flat. It was a smooth, dark gray surface that reflected the sunlight with a strange, metallic sheen. It was lined with neat stone borders. The jolt they felt was the moment the carriage wheels transitioned from the broken dirt path onto this impossible, perfect road. Guo stood there, completely stunned. How could a road like this even exist? The driver looked back at me, his face full of grievance. He stammered that it was his first time seeing it, too. I didn't wait for another word. I crawled back into the carriage, my heart racing. "Your Majesty," I whispered urgently. "You have to see this for yourself." The emperor frowned, looking annoyed, but he leaned out of the carriage anyway. Just like me, he froze. A look of pure shock washed over his face. Stretched out before us was a perfectly straight highway. On both sides, lush green crops swayed in the breeze. It was a sight he had never seen in all his years of ruling. "Guo Tianyang," he said, his voice tight. "Are you absolutely sure we are in Taoyuan County?" I scrambled to pull out the map again, checking the landmarks with trembling fingers. I nodded vigorously. "Yes, sire. This is the place." The carriage continued to move, but the ride was suddenly, eerily smooth. A cool, refreshing breeze drifted through the window, and as the emperor looked out at the tranquil scenery, the tension in his brow finally began to soften. I never imagined a tiny, insignificant county could build such a strange and wonderful road, he mused. Interesting. Very interesting. We must see what else this Taoyuan County has to offer. I couldn't help but agree. A place with roads like this had to have a very capable official in charge. After another half hour, we began to see signs of life. People were walking or riding donkey carts, swaying lazily along the smooth path. Farmers worked in the fields nearby, looking busy but content. The emperor nodded with approval. He was impressed by how orderly everything seemed, but I could tell he was also confused. Why was such a talented official completely unknown to the capital? As the greenery blurred past, a set of city walls began to rise in the distance. As we got closer, all three of us, the emperor, the driver, and myself, gaped in unison. Taoyuan County wasn't just a town, it was a fortress. The walls were a stark, grayish-white, standing over 10 meters tall. They looked indestructible. Above the massive gates, 3 words were embossed in shimmering gold, Taoyuan County. The emperor's shock quickly turned into a cold, simmering rage. He grabbed my arm and hissed under his breath. "Guo Tianyang, get over here." I was terrified. I quickly paid the driver to get him away from us and walked over to the emperor, my knees shaking. "What do I even pay you for?" he growled, his voice low so no one would overhear. "We are barely 100 miles from the capital, and there is a fortress like this standing here? Why was I never told?" I understood his anger. The emperor had spent years at war. He had seen countless small towns, and usually, their walls were nothing but crumbling mud and straw. But this was high-spec military architecture. Having a hidden power like this right under the sun of heaven's nose was a massive security risk. I dropped to my knees, my head hitting the ground like I was pounding garlic. I truly didn't know, sire. No one has ever mentioned this place. Even the best scouts wouldn't think to look in a remote mountain valley like this. Who could have guessed there was a luxury fortress hidden in the middle of nowhere? People nearby started to stare at us with curiosity. The emperor sighed, his anger deflating into exhaustion. He had known me since he was 10 years old, and he didn't have the heart to be too cruel, even if I was failing at my job. Get up, he muttered. I'll settle the score with you when we get back. I felt a wave of relief. I knew the emperor's temperament. If he said he'd settle it later, I was likely safe for now. I wiped my nose, put on a pathetic face, and stood up. Thank you, master. We headed toward the city gates, but 3 guards immediately blocked our path. Show your travel permits. I had them ready and handed them over. The guard glanced at them, handed them back, and asked, What business do you have in Taoyuan? Trade, I replied quickly. My master is in the porcelain business. We've come to look around. The moment he heard the word trade, the guard's face lit up. He whispered something to his partner, who immediately turned and ran into the city at full speed. The emperor looked confused but didn't say anything. Instead, he gestured toward the massive walls. These walls are quite impressive, the emperor said, testing the waters. They must have cost a fortune. Did the local government have to raise taxes to pay for them? Before the guard in front of us could answer, another guard behind him started laughing. I told you they'd ask. Pay up. The first guard rolled his eyes at the emperor and reluctantly pulled out 10 copper coins, handing them to his friend. Then he turned back to us and explained, The walls? They're just for show. Didn't you see the stone slabs glued to the outside? The patterns are just carved in. Our county magistrate thought the old dirt walls were ugly, so he came up with this trick. It didn't cost much at all. The emperor and I shared a laugh. So, the magistrate was just a man with expensive taste. We felt a bit foolish for being so worried. Seeing that the guard had lost his bet because of us, the emperor felt generous. He signaled me to give the man a silver tael. But when I held out the money, the guard's expression instantly changed. What are you doing? He snapped. Take that back. We don't do that here in Taoyuan. My hand froze in midair. I didn't know whether to put it away or keep offering. I had never been to a place where a guard refused a bribe. It was eerie. The emperor's eyes narrowed, lost in thought. Even a lowly guard had this much integrity. This place was getting more interesting by the second. We tucked the money away and walked into the city. The moment we stepped through the gates, we fell silent again. The streets were paved with clean, smooth stone slabs. Buildings lined the roads, looking brand new and polished. The streets were packed with people and bustling stalls. To be honest, it looked more luxurious than the capital itself. Master, I whispered, they used stone slabs for the entire road. That's incredibly rare. The emperor nodded grimly. Even in the capital, most of the outer city roads were just dirt that turned into a swamp whenever it rained. Here, the stone went on as far as the eye could see. But more importantly, the people looked different. They weren't pale or sickly. Their faces were flushed with health, and I saw more than a few people who looked quite well fed. Even in the capital, you didn't see this many healthy-looking commoners. Master, I suggested, perhaps we should find an inn first. The emperor agreed. He wanted to stay here for a few days to figure out what was going on. As we walked, he looked at the thriving city with a mix of envy and wonder. If every county in the world was like this, he whispered to himself, I wouldn't have a single worry. Suddenly, I spotted a sign. Master, look, there's an inn. The emperor looked up and went speechless. The sign literally said there is an inn. In the bottom corner of the plaque, there was a small character for official. We walked inside, and the shopkeeper greeted us with a massive smile. Welcome. Are you looking for a meal or a room? A room, I said. Excellent. We have 3 tiers. First class is 5 taels, second is 3, and third is 1. 5 taels. I gasped, stepping forward. Why is it so expensive? Are you trying to rob us because we're outsiders? The shopkeeper waved his hands defensively. Oh no, sir. We are honest folk. Ask anyone. These are the standard rates. And since this is a government-run hotel, our prices are actually 20% cheaper than the private ones. The emperor's ears perked up. Government-run? The local office runs this inn. The shopkeeper nodded proudly. That's right. Every major industry in this county is run by the government. There is an inn, the waiter explained with a grin. Our county magistrate named it himself. It was built specifically to accommodate traveling merchants. Don't be fooled by the 5 taels price tag for a first-class room. During peak trading season, you'd be lucky to even snag a spot in 3rd class. My master, Emperor Jing, thought about it for a moment and nodded. He paid the fee. This Taoyuan County was getting stranger by the second, and he wanted to see more. The waiter led us upstairs and brought a pot of tea to the room. He poured 2 cups with practiced grace. Please, masters, try the tea. Our water here is famous for being sweet. I'll leave you to it. If you need anything, just pull this red string by the door. Pulling a string to call for service? Jing remarked, watching the waiter leave. Interesting. We should implement this in the palace. I bowed slightly. Your Majesty, please have some tea. You haven't had a proper meal all day. I'll go arrange some food and wine shortly. No rush, Jing said, picking up his cup. He squinted at the liquid. The tea was a pale, clear yellow with 2 delicate leaves unfurling at the bottom. I took a sip first to test it. My eyes widened. It's fragrant and elegant, Your Majesty. There's almost a hint of medicinal sweetness to it. It's far better than anything in the capital. The tea is good, but the water is even better. Jing took a long drink, clearly parched from the journey. Refreshing. This Taoyuan County is full of surprises. I looked around the room, noticing the walls. Master, look at the walls. They're covered in white cloth. Jing touched the surface. It felt like coarse white linen. It makes the room look incredibly clean and bright, he noted. I wandered into the adjacent washroom to check the facilities, but a moment later, I let out a sharp cry of shock. Your Majesty, come quick. There's a well in here. A well? On the 2nd floor? Jing hurried over. He found me leaning over a ceramic basin filled with water. It looked like a large, ornate bowl bolted to the floor. It really is a well, Jing muttered, stunned. I tapped the side of the basin. It's made of high-quality porcelain. To fire a piece this large must be incredibly difficult. Using it for a well casing is beyond extravagant. But the shape is so strange. Why is the opening so small? I was thirsty and the water looked pristine. I cupped some in my hands and took a deep gulp. Sweet and crisp. Truly excellent water. Your Majesty, you must try some. I'll call the waiter to explain how they got a well up here. I ran to the door and yanked the red string. The waiter appeared a minute later. I pointed at the ceramic basin. Young man, how is there a well in this room? The waiter looked at us, clearly used to this reaction from outsiders. Masters, that isn't a well. It's a flushing toilet. I felt like I had been struck by lightning. I slowly turned my head to look at the emperor. He was staring at me with a look that could kill. My face went bright red. I felt the urge to scrub my tongue with lye. A toilet? I stammered, trying to hide my horror. Why would you put a toilet inside a room? Why isn't the latrine outside? Jing's expression was grim. I could tell he was thanking the heavens he hadn't taken a drink yet. If the Emperor of the Great Qin had drunk toilet water, his legacy would be ruined forever. It's the new style in Taoyuan, the waiter explained proudly. It's very convenient. See this string connected to the tank? When you're finished, you just pull it, and everything is washed away. I fought back the urge to vomit. Where's the water coming from? You saw those tall towers outside next to the buildings? Those are water towers. People refill them every morning. The tank for this room is hidden in the ceiling. Jing nodded slowly. He had wondered about those giant wooden vats on stilts. So that was their purpose. I couldn't hold it back anymore. The realization of what I had just swallowed hit me like a physical blow. I leaned over the porcelain bowl and retched, emptying my stomach into the well. Exactly, the waiter chirped. A lot of guests use it for that when they've had too much to drink. After I finished heaving, I glared at him. The waiter reached over and pulled the cord. A rush of water swirled through the bowl, carrying my shame away and leaving the porcelain sparkling clean. Even the smell vanished instantly. Jing was fascinated despite the disgust. Where does the waste go? Through pipes, the waiter said. Taoyuan is built on high ground. The pipes lead to a massive collection pit outside the city. Our magistrate spent 2 years building the system. He says pits shouldn't be near the town, or the filth seeps into the ground and makes the well water bitter. The waiter beamed. That's why our water is so sweet. People from the neighboring county even come here to buy our water. Our magistrate is a saint. He can't stand the thought of people drinking bad water. I wiped my mouth, bitterness rising in my throat. A saint? He's dumping your waste into the neighboring county's backyard so your water stays sweet, and then he sells them the water back? That's not a saint, that's a devil. Even in the imperial palace, I had never encountered someone so shamelessly clever. Jing's throat tightened. He realized why the water in the capital always tasted slightly bitter. It was a sickening realization. It wasn't easy, the waiter continued, oblivious to our anger. The magistrate even thought about connecting the pipes to the capital's moat. He figured with so many people there, it would be a gold mine. But it was too far and the elevation was wrong, so the water wheels couldn't push it that far. Jing and I stared at him, speechless. This magistrate was a menace. Is the waste just wasted? Jing asked. Don't you use it for fertilizer? Some of it, the waiter said. But we don't rely on farming here. Oh, and we don't use wooden scrapers in our toilets. We have water sprayers and paper. He reached behind the toilet and pulled out a wooden handle that looked like a small faucet. He pressed a lever, and a jet of water shot out. This is a saltwater sprayer. The magistrate says salt water is the only way to get truly clean. Every inn in the county has them. We refill the salt water every morning. My eyes lit up. That is incredibly convenient. Jing, however, looked like he was about to faint. Using salt water to wash your backside? The sheer luxury was staggering. The waiter then opened a small compartment next to the toilet, revealing a stack of soft white paper. Once you're washed, use this paper to dry off. Then throw it in the basket. We've already crumpled and softened the paper for you. Jing and I were stunned again. You use paper for that? The waiter nodded, ready to explain the next wonder of Taoyuan County. I'm truly ashamed, the waiter said, looking genuinely apologetic. Our inn can only provide this kind of paper. It's still a bit stiff. I've heard the paper they use over at the magistrate's office is as soft as gluten. He wasn't done showing off. By the way, if you use the public restrooms outside, you'll find this same paper there. Our magistrate doesn't allow silk or cloth for wiping. He says it's unhygienic, so you won't find a single scrap of toilet silk in the whole county. Then, his voice dropped to a whisper, warning us of something darker. I should tell you both. When the magistrate first introduced this paper, a lot of people weren't used to it. He has a henchman named Zhang Biao, a real brute. Back then, if Zhang Biao caught anyone using silk in the stalls, he'd literally sew their backside shut. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. If you see him, don't provoke him, the waiter cautioned. He has a mole on his forehead and isn't much to look at, but he has godlike strength and, well, he's not very bright. Anyway, your toothbrushes and cleaning supplies are right here on the side. Call me if you need anything. As he walked out, Jing and I sat there, stunned beyond words. I felt a phantom sting in my lower half just thinking about that Zhang Biao guy. Jing waved his hand dismissively to send the waiter away, then turned to the side counter. He spotted a toothbrush and a small basin, but what caught his eye was a mirror hanging on the wall. He hadn't noticed it before. He stared at his reflection. Every wrinkle, every gray hair at his temples was crystal clear. He reached out, touching the glass with a trembling hand. This mirror, it's also a miracle, he whispered with a bitter smile. Am I truly getting old? Why is it that every single thing in this place is something I've never heard of? As soon as the waiter was gone, Hua Tianyang didn't care about mirrors. He lunged at the storage compartment like a starving dog hitting a bone. He pulled out a thick stack of the white paper and rubbed it against his face. Master, it's good paper. It's incredible, Hua shouted. You could actually write on this. Jing glanced at the paper and nodded slowly. I see. I'm tired now. Tomorrow, we'll find a way to meet this local magistrate. I want to see what kind of eccentric genius can run a small county like this. Meanwhile, in the backyard of the Taoyuan County government office, things were much more relaxed. Xiao Tao, your massage technique is way worse than the girls at the Snowy Moon brothel, a voice complained. Fang Jingyi was sprawled out on a lounge chair, chewing on some dried fruit. His voice was muffled and lazy. Behind him stood a pretty young maid with bright, mischievous eyes. Her name was Fang Yutao. Fang Jingyi had adopted her as an orphan 6 years ago and given her his own surname. She was 16 now, in the prime of her youth. Hearing his complaint, Xiao Tao gave him a sharp shove. Fine. Then go to the Snowy Moon brothel. All right, I will, Fang Jingyi muttered, starting to get up. Xiao Tao immediately pinned him back down and started kneading his shoulders with extra force. Yes, that's the spot. Keep that pressure, he sighed. Xiao Tao gritted her teeth, continuing the massage, just as Zhang Biao walked in. Young master, Zhang Biao said. My boys say 2 new merchants just entered the city. They claim to be in the porcelain business. Should I bring them in for questioning? Fang Jingyi shook his head. What's the rush? You're too used to acting like a bandit. When the time is right, they'll come to us on their own. He popped another piece of fruit into his mouth. Times are different now. Our industries are just starting to move. We need to be professional and follow the rules if we want to expand. If we keep making the people angry, it won't last. Besides, with my performance record, I could be promoted to the capital any day. I don't want some disgruntled local reporting me just as I'm entering the imperial court. He looked at the brute. Zhang Biao, are you trying to get rid of me? Zhang Biao grinned, showing his teeth. Don't worry, master. No one is taking you away. As long as I'm here, you'll stay in Taoyuan County, even if it's in a coffin. Get out, Fang barked. The next morning, the sun rose over a city that felt more like a dream than reality. I woke up feeling more refreshed than I had in years. Even the emperor, Jing, seemed to have slept well. Guo Tianyang was already standing by, waiting for him to rise. Jing stretched his arms. The beds in this inn, they're actually more comfortable than the ones in the palace. Strange. It's true, Guo said, bringing over a basin of water. I checked last night. There are 12 layers of padding under the sheets. It's incredibly soft. Jing wiped his face. Let's eat. Then we walk. Breakfast was simple, just porridge and small side dishes. But Jing ate with a gusto I'd never seen. Even the pickles taste better here, he chuckled. It seems a high and mighty emperor lives a less flavorful life than a lowly 7th-rank magistrate. Guo Tianyang bowed his head. Master, we must be careful. This magistrate acts without restraint. This level of luxury and waste in a small county is a bad omen. It shouldn't be encouraged. Jing snorted. Waste. Does money fall from the sky? If the people in such a remote place can live this well, I'd be happy if the whole empire was this wasteful. You're getting more senile by the day, Guo. Guo didn't dare argue. He just stood there like a scolded child. After breakfast, we hit the streets. Jing watched everything. The roads were spotless. There wasn't a single beggar or thug in sight. Even the commoners looked clean and well-dressed, almost like scholars. As we reached a crowded area, a strange song drifted through the air. You love me. I love you. Taoyuan milk tea is so sweet. What on earth is that? Jing asked, stopping in his tracks. We turned to see a middle-aged man at a tea stall, singing at the top of his lungs to attract a crowd. Guo Tianyang looked disgusted. What vulgar nonsense. My ears are bleeding. This county is cursed. Guo couldn't help himself. He spat a glob of phlegm onto the street. Before the spit could even dry, an old lady with a red armband teleported out of nowhere and blocked our path. She held out her hand, fingers splayed. Spitting in public. 5 copper coins fine, she shrieked. Jing frowned. The lady wore simple clothes, but her red armband had the words Health Inspector stitched on it. Guo was furious. I spit in the palace all the time. Who are you to tell me what to do? The old lady scoffed. Out-of-towners, huh? Spitting is forbidden here. 5 coins. That's the magistrate's rule. Don't like it? Come see the judge with me. Guo's eyes nearly popped out. You're taking me to court for a spit? He was about to roar back, but Jing's cold voice cut him off. Pay her. Guo reluctantly handed over the money. The old lady grinned, satisfied. As she turned to leave, Jing stopped her. Ma'am, we're new here. Can I ask a question? She looked him up and down. Seeing he was polite, she nodded. Go ahead. Why are there no beggars in Taoyuan County? The old lady laughed. You're a funny one. You want beggars? We don't have those. Our magistrate is a kind soul. He can't stand seeing poor people, so he has them all hauled away to dig trenches. Jing choked on his own breath. Guo leaned in and whispered, Master, this magistrate is a monster. He's destroying the reputation of the government. Watch your mouth, the old lady snapped. She had heard him. In Taoyuan, nobody talks bad about our magistrate. If you weren't tourists, you'd have been beaten by now. How is he not a monster? Guo argued. Dragging beggars off to dig ditches? That's a death sentence. You don't know a thing. The lady was cut off by a shout from down the street. Someone's taking a case to court. Come watch the drama. The old lady's eyes lit up. She forgot all about us and sprinted toward the commotion. Come on, Jing said, his pace quickening. Let's see what's happening. We followed the crowd, jogging all the way to the gates of the county yamen. We stood frozen in place, staring at the building before us. It was massive. The entire complex, including the front plaza, had to cover at least 3 acres. A stone gatehouse stood at the entrance with Taoyuan County Yamen carved into it. Beyond that lay a vast plaza paved with smooth stone slabs, leading to a long, wide staircase that climbed toward the main structure. The yamen itself was a 3-story building, wide and imposing. Its gray and white exterior felt cold and majestic. Standing at the base of those stairs, I felt a heavy sense of pressure. Guo Tianyang's jaw dropped. How can a county yamen look like this? He stammered. They say officials spend a fortune on their offices, but this, how much did this cost? I didn't answer. I just stared at the main gate for a long moment before stepping inside. Guo followed close behind. As we reached the inner hall, things finally started to feel familiar. Aside from the sheer size, the interior layout matched a standard government office. A massive plaque hung high above the center, reading, "Suspended high, listening in silence." The local citizens were already gathered outside the inner railing, whispering in excitement. Inside the hall, one man was kneeling while another stood. Guards lined the sides, holding their red and black staves, standing as straight as arrows. Everyone was waiting for the magistrate to appear. Behind the scenes, Fang Jingyi was scowling. He held his arms out as a young woman named Xiao Tao helped him into his official robes. Damn it, he muttered. Noon isn't even over yet, and some troublemaker is here to file a complaint. Don't people let others sleep. I finally had 2 quiet months, and now I have to hold court again. Xiao Tao didn't say a word. What are we eating when I get back? Fang Jingyi asked, his stomach growling. I haven't had breakfast. I'm starving. Beef, Xiao Tao said, patting down the wrinkles in his robe. It had been so long since he wore it that it was gathering dust. Beef again? Nothing fresh. I'm sick of it, he grumbled. Xiao Tao rolled her eyes. You're all set. Go. I'm going to cook. Fang Jingyi flicked his sleeves, checked his reflection with a satisfied nod, and walked out. Court is in session. He took his seat behind the high desk and slammed the gavel. Who is the one accusing me in my own court? A man named Zhang Lao Lu was kneeling on the floor, sobbing loudly. Hearing the crowd grow thicker, he wailed even harder. When the cheers of the people erupted, he looked up and saw Fang Jingyi. His face brightened for a split second before he lowered his head to resume his performance. Lord, I have been wronged. I am here to sue the yamen. Fang Jingyi's nose nearly twisted with rage. Sue the yamen? You've got some nerve. I leave you people alone for a few days, and now you think you can sit on my head and stay there? He slammed the gavel again. Who is the one accusing me? The crowd burst into laughter. Asterisk slap. 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 Asterisk Fang Jingyi hammered the gavel repeatedly. Silence. Silence. Anyone else who makes a noise will be dragged in for 10 strokes of the cane. The hall went dead quiet. I saw parents covering their children's mouths. I frowned, watching this ridiculous scene. My heart sank with disappointment. So this was the magistrate of Taoyuan? He looked like a total crook. He couldn't stand straight, he couldn't sit straight, and he looked like he hadn't even woken up yet. How did a man like this command so much respect? Guo leaned in and whispered, Master, look at him. He's arrogant and unreasonable. Be quiet, I snapped. Just watch. Zhang Lao Lu, still kneeling, looked confused. Lord, I'm not suing you. I'm suing Lu Fa, the constable from the yamen. Fang Jingyi's face turned slightly red. Fine, fine. Next time, don't take such long pauses. Speak. What did Lu Fa do? Lord, I run a restaurant in the north of the city. Lu Fa has eaten there many times without paying. He even smashed 2 jars of my best wine. I went to the mediator several times, but he won't pay. He owes me 17 taels and 2 cents. I had no choice but to bother you. Fang Jingyi's expression softened. To him, this was a tiny matter. As long as no one was dead, it wasn't a big deal. He looked at the man standing next to Zhang. It was indeed Lu Fa. Lu Fa, Fang Jingyi barked. Do you owe him the money? Seeing the magistrate's anger, Lu Fa knew there was no point in lying. He hit the floor with a thud and started crying. Lord, I really don't have any money. I smashed his wine because I was drunk and in a bad mood. I'm not hiding from him. I still owe the gambling house 10 taels too. Now, Fang Jingyi was actually angry. He let out a cold laugh. Good. Very good. I have told you time and time again, government employees are forbidden from gambling houses. You are forbidden from harassing the people. You didn't listen to a single word. Guards, give him 20 strokes. Before the guards could even move, Lu Fa bit his lip, pulled up his shirt to bite on the fabric, and laid flat on the ground. Asterisk thwack. 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 Asterisk by the time the 20 strokes were finished, Lu Fa's backside was a bloody mess. Lord, I was wrong, he wheezed. I watched in shock. The magistrate's authority was absolute. The defendant didn't even try to resist. It was a strange way to handle a case, but the discipline was undeniable. Even Guo looked puzzled. It was rare to see subordinates this obedient. Fang Jingyi spoke calmly. Since this is your first offense, your salary is halved this month. You will sweep the streets for 3 months as community service. If it happens again, you're kicked out of Taoyuan. Lu Fa actually smiled through his pale lips. Thank you for your mercy, Lord. Take him to the clinic, Fang Jingyi ordered. Zhang Laolu looked at the bloody mess and felt a pang of regret. They had argued, but Taoyuan was small. They were practically neighbors. He hadn't expected such a brutal beating. But then he realized something. Lord, what about my money? Fang Jingyi spread his hands. You saw him. He has no money. What? Zhang was stunned. He had made an enemy and still didn't have his cash. He looked like his world had ended. Fang Jingyi sighed. However, I won't let an honest man suffer. What's your restaurant called? I'll stop by tonight for 3 drinks. That's all. Court adjourned. Lao Lu's Bistro, Zhang shouted, his face transforming into pure joy. He kowtowed 3 times. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. He practically sprinted out of the hall. Before leaving, Fang Jingyi glanced at me and Guo. He knew almost everyone in Taoyuan. He knew the regular merchants and the local faces. We were clearly outsiders. As the crowd dispersed, Guo and I stood there, completely baffled. Was that it? The case was settled without any logic or legal procedure. Master, Guo muttered. Something is very wrong here. Everything feels weird. Maybe we should just reveal who we are and demand answers. I thought about it. No, not yet. He said he's going to that bistro tonight. We're going too. We spent the rest of the day wandering the streets. The more I saw, the more I realized I needed to remember. I had Guo take out a pen and paper to record everything. By evening, we made our way to the north side of the city. We found Lao Lu's bistro easily. It was packed. A giant red banner hung from the 2nd floor. Asterisk, welcome Lord Magistrate. Come taste our new dish, Angelica stewed chicken, asterisk. I realized it immediately. The magistrate wasn't just going for a drink. He was using his presence to bring the man business to make up for the lost money. He was clever, extremely clever. Guo leaned in and started whispering in my ear again. He was relentless. Your Majesty, this man's behavior is completely out of line. How can an official and a merchant be so thick as thieves? I felt a prickle of unease myself. An official in uniform mixing with common tradesmen? It was messy. It lacked dignity. It violated every rule of decorum I believed in. Let's go, I said. We're going inside to see for ourselves. Fang Jingyi hadn't arrived yet. Guo and I headed straight for the 2nd floor and grabbed a small table right by the stairs. We ordered 2 simple plates of leeks and sat there in silence, waiting. It didn't take long. A commotion erupted downstairs. Fang Jingyi strolled up the stairs, flanked by Zhang Biao, Xiao Tao, and a small entourage. He looked incredibly relaxed. As he reached the top, his eyes flicked toward me for a split second, but he didn't stop. He walked right past us and took the large table in the center of the room. The restaurant owner, Zhang Laolu, hovered over him eagerly. Lord Magistrate, I've had the leeks ready for you. Should I bring them out now? Fang Jingyi waved a hand dismissively. Go ahead, bring the food. But remember, that banner outside stays up for 3 days at most. Got it. Zhang Laolu bowed low, grinning. I understand the rules, my lord. Don't you worry. One more thing, Fang added lazily. Clear this floor. Send everyone else downstairs. I don't like being disturbed while I eat. He gave Zhang Biao a meaningful look. The big man understood immediately. He marched to the edge of the stairs and bellowed at the top of his lungs. Tonight's bill is on young Master Fong. Everyone on the second floor moved downstairs. The customers didn't need to be told twice. They cheered, delighted by the free meal, and scrambled down the steps. A roar of celebration rose from the first floor. Zhang Lao Lu was beaming. Having the magistrate here was a gold mine. He started to follow the crowd, but then he spotted Gua and me still sitting in our corner. "Gentlemen, if you please," Zhang said politely. "Our magistrate is treating everyone today. You can eat for free downstairs." I didn't move. I didn't say a word. Gua, however, let out a sharp, high-pitched scoff. "We aren't beggars. We don't need someone else to pay for our dinner." Zhang Laolu looked stuck. He gritted his teeth and leaned in, whispering, "Look, if you move downstairs now, I'll give you a free jar of wine when you leave. How does that sound?" I ignored him and took a slow sip of my tea. Gua's face darkened. "Get lost," he hissed. "Don't ruin my master's mood." The owner was helpless. He shot a desperate look toward Fong Jingyi. The magistrate was watching us now, a playful, curious glint in his eyes. He spoke up, his voice smooth. "Since our friends don't want to leave, perhaps they'd do me the honor of joining my table for a meal?" I turned my head and gave him a faint smile. I stood up, gave a quick polite gesture with my hands, and walked over without any hesitation. Gua followed right behind me. Once we were seated, Fong Jingyi studied us. "I don't recognize you two. You're from out of town, aren't you?" I didn't look away. I stared right back at him. "I am Li Long. I'm in the porcelain business in the capital. This is my accountant, Guoda." Fong seemed a bit uncomfortable under my gaze. He kept his tone neutral. "And what brings a porcelain merchant to Taoyuan County?" "We were on our way to Hengjiang Prefecture to pick up stock," I replied. "We're just passing through." Fong's eyes sharpened. He was alert now. "Hengjiang? If you're coming from the capital, why take a detour through Taoyuan? The main government road is much faster." Gua had the excuse ready. "We heard there was a landslide on the main road. We didn't want to get stuck, so we took the long way around. We ended up here by pure chance." "So when are you leaving?" Fong asked. "Actually, we aren't," I said. "Taoyuan is full of strange and new things. If we brought some of these goods back to the capital, the profit would be massive. I wonder if the magistrate would allow it." Fong laughed. "Wonderful. There's nothing we love more in Taoyuan than investors. To be honest, our newest invention, the ceramic flush toilet, is a masterpiece. It's huge, complex, and high quality. It would sell anywhere." When Gua heard the word toilet, his face twisted like he'd swallowed a fly. "But," Fong continued, "that's not really for export yet. If you want custom orders, we can talk. Anything you see in this town is up for negotiation. Just come to the yamen later to sign a contract. Seen anything you like yet?" I picked up my teacup and took a sip. I must admit, this place is full of surprises. Everything has opened my eyes. Even this tea. I doubt even the emperor in his palace gets to taste something this unique. "Oh, they don't have this in the capital?" Fong asked. "No," I said firmly. The second the word left my lips, Fong Jingyi slammed his hand on the table and stood up. He looked furious. "Silence. Mr. Li, you mustn't speak such nonsense. How dare you slander the emperor?" I was stunned. "The whole world belongs to His Majesty," Fong shouted, his voice full of righteous passion. "And you're telling me he can't even taste this simple tea?" I remember the stories. Our emperor led his armies in person, sleeping in the wind and rain to bring peace to the land. Now that the world is settled, he works himself to the bone in the court for the sake of the people. Without the emperor, there is no Taoyuan. Without Taoyuan, there is no tea. He looked like he was about to cry. To think the emperor can't drink this, it breaks my heart. I wish I could fly to the capital right now just to brew him a cup myself. If His Majesty can't have it, how can I possibly have the face to drink it? I won't do it. With a dramatic flourish, he poured his tea onto the floor. "Long live the emperor," he declared, then sat back down with an air of immense dignity. Behind him, Xiao Tao rolled her eyes. She'd seen this act before. Fong always pulled the patriot card when dealing with outsiders. It was his ultimate safety net. I sat there, my hand frozen with my teacup halfway to my mouth. My eyes were twitching. I didn't know whether to put the cup down or keep holding it. Guo was even worse. He was staring around the room, completely bewildered. Who was this guy even talking to? The sheer level of long-distance brown nosing was staggering. Gua looked at me, then cleared his throat and whispered, "Long live the Emperor." Fong's ears perked up. "Mr. Gua," he said sternly, "loving the Emperor isn't just about words. You have to keep him in your heart at all times, like I do. There are so many people in the capital who scream, 'Long live the Emperor,' while doing things behind his back. Those people are no better than animals." Gua's face went pale. He looked like he'd been slapped. He glanced at me guiltily, looking like a kicked puppy. "The magistrate is right. That's exactly what I was thinking." My face was starting to flush. I'd heard people flatter me my entire life, but I'd never heard it done like this. It was awkward, it was shameless, but I had to admit, it felt strangely good. Suddenly, Fong's tone shifted. He became a salesman again. "Now about this tea. It's specially processed by our local masters. The flavor is one of a kind. If you took this to the capital, the nobility would fight over it. And hey, that way the Emperor might actually get a taste. Are you two interested?" Gua's face contorted. So that was the play. All that screaming about the Emperor just to sell some tea? "How much?" Gua asked tentatively. 10 taels of silver for 1 ounce, Fong said smoothly. 10 taels? Gua nearly fell off his chair. I didn't know much about market prices, but Gua did. In the capital, you could buy a whole pound of decent tea for 1 tael. Even the premium stuff topped out around 10. This was just local tea. "Isn't that a bit expensive?" Gua stammered. Fong leaned forward, his eyes wide with mock offense. 10 taels is expensive? For tea the Emperor hasn't even tasted? How could that be expensive? He didn't wait for an answer. He just kept talking. "Let me teach you the art of business," Fong said, leaning in. "These tea leaves cost me 100 taels a pound to produce. By the time they reach the capital, you shouldn't sell them for a penny less than 200. He didn't care if anyone actually bought it yet. He was talking about brand positioning. According to him, this tea was grown in the most prestigious golden soil and soaked in 16 hours of sunlight every day. He claimed every acre was tended by a personal guardian. There were natural hot springs nearby and gold mines beneath the roots. And the pickers? Fong continued, his eyes gleaming. They aren't just girls. They are celestial beauties who are also master chefs and poets. They pick the leaves with their tongues, reciting a verse of poetry for every single bud. I stared at him. Was he serious? He then suggested we order custom porcelain boxes from his county, half an ounce per box. He even had a name for it, small box tea. "Tell them only royalty and high nobility are worthy of drinking this," he whispered. "In court, if you don't have this tea, can you even call yourself an aristocrat? Real nobles don't buy what's best, they buy what's most expensive. Here in Taoyuan, our motto is, don't seek the best, only the priciest." Gua covered his face in shame. He'd spent decades in the palace thinking he knew every trick in the book. Looking at Fong, I could tell what Gua was thinking. To be this much of a dog, you really have to be a master. I sat there in silence. I felt like a stalk of green leek waiting to be harvested. Was this how the palace procurement officers were being swindled all these years? Fong smiled, looking satisfied, as if he'd just guided 2 lost lambs toward enlightenment. Just then, the food started arriving from the kitchen. Zhang Lao Lu, the owner, personally carried the tray up to the 2nd floor. "Haha, the chicken soup is here," Zhang announced. The steam rose in white clouds. The broth was milky white, and the meat looked tender enough to fall off the bone. "Come, drink while it's hot," Fong said, playing the generous host. Traveling is hard work. Being able to drink a bowl of my Taoyuan chicken soup is one of life's great joys. He scooped a bowl for me, making sure I got a thick drumstick. Then he scooped one for himself, another drumstick. Finally, he handed a bowl to Gua. It was a piece of dry chicken breast. Gua gave Fong a resentful look. This man really knew how to play favorites based on rank. Fong didn't care. He knew I was the one in charge. So, Fong asked between bites, "Are you interested in the tea? Our porcelain is good, but it's not unique. Tea, however, the profit margins are massive. It's easy to transport and won't break on the road." I sipped the soup. It was delicious, savory, rich, and better than anything I'd tasted in the palace. "Magistrate Fong, what is this tea called?" Fong hesitated. He clearly hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd only started promoting this roasted tea recently. It strengthens the spirit and extends life, he lied shamelessly. Let's call it Great Celestial Tea. Gua's face turned bright red. He looked like he was about to choke. To be honest, Gua managed to say, we didn't bring much silver. We can't buy a large shipment. How much did you bring? Fong asked. 2,000 taels. Fong's eyes lit up. For two merchants traveling with porcelain, 2,000 taels in pocket money was a lot. That's plenty. Take what you can. We need to open the market first. If you run out, just come back to Taoyuan. He poured us each a cup of wine. I took a sip and my eyes nearly popped out of my head. The flavor was unmistakable. Peach blossom nectar? I gasped. Fong beamed. Exactly. It's the backbone of Taoyuan's economy. The next batch isn't even finished yet. I bet in the capital, people are begging for a single cup. My mood shifted. Gua looked at me nervously. This wine was famous for being incredibly strong, and it had taken the capital by storm. I loved it so much I had personally designated it as a tribute wine for the palace. But there was a problem. I set my cup down, my face turning cold. I heard this wine belongs to Prince Wu's estate. Is Taoyuan County backed by the prince? No. Fong waved his hand. The wine has always belonged to Taoyuan. We just have a trade agreement. A few years ago, someone from the prince's manor passed through, tasted it, and signed an exclusive distribution deal. The prince has made a fortune off us. Fong sighed, sounding annoyed. I thought about giving him the tea business too, but I decided against it. I can't let one person control all our products. If they hold the distribution, they hold me by the throat. I need a wide net of distributors to keep my position stable. I felt a wave of relief. Prince Wu was known as a virtuous man in the capital, but it seemed he'd just stumbled into a lucky deal. Has the prince ever visited Taoyuan? Never, Fong said with a look of disdain. He only sends his steward. That's another reason I don't want to work with him anymore. The man has no ambition. If I hadn't been desperate for money and connections back then, I wouldn't have signed with such a useless partner. He went on a rant about how the prince didn't even market the wine properly and just relied on its natural popularity. He called the prince a worthless thigh to lean on and regretted the exclusive contract. I see, I said, suppressing a smile. Taoyuan truly has deep roots. I think I must cooperate with you, Magistrate Fong. Where's the tea plantation? We'd like to see it tomorrow. Fong gave a shy, awkward smile. Trade secret. Can't show you. I didn't push him, but I had a feeling there was no plantation. He was probably buying cheap wild leaves for pennies and roasting them with herbs. But the wine was real, and the man was brilliant, if a bit crooked. I raised my glass. Fine. I'll take a batch of tea to test in the capital. I'll be counting on you, Magistrate. Of course. Fong toasted back. He spent the rest of the night lecturing us on things like hunger marketing and brand effect. By the end of the meal, we were both dizzy from the wine and his wild theories. As we finished, Zhang Lao Lu scurried over with a wide grin. Lord Magistrate, did you enjoy the meal? Fong Jingyi leaned back, picking his teeth with a chicken bone. He gave a slight, satisfied nod. Not bad, he muttered. The meal actually lived up to the hype. All right, what's the damage? Bring me the bill. Zhang Lao Lu bowed so low his forehead nearly hit the floor. It comes to 506 taels, my lord. But for you, let's call it an even 500. The room went dead silent. 500 taels? Were we eating solid silver? I felt my jaw drop, and Gua looked just as stunned. Fong let out a sharp, angry laugh. Well, Zhang Lao Lu, you've got guts. You're actually trying to fleece me? You've got a bright future in robbery, I'll give you that. Cold sweat poured down Zhang's face as he scrambled to his knees. Lord Magistrate, please, let me explain. A few kids outside didn't know the rules. They started shouting that the food was free today because of your visit. Dozens of people swarmed in. We had to set up tables all the way down the street. I had no choice but to keep serving. This price is already discounted. I ran out of ingredients and had to borrow stock from the restaurant next door. Fong actually looked amused. The people of Taoyuan are getting craftier by the day. But 500 taels for a few dozen people? That's still highway robbery. It wasn't just the food. Zhang wailed. Those rascals insisted on the best wine. And when they got drunk, they started demanding Han melons. I had to rush out and buy a dozen of them just to keep the peace. Fong's eyes lit up instantly. The Han melons are ripe? How much did you pay? 10 taels each, Zhang whispered. Were they sweet? Fully ripe. Fong pressed. Yes, perfectly ripe. Gua and I exchanged a confused look. 500 taels for a meal was one thing, but Han melons in early spring? It wasn't even summer yet. Where would they get watermelons? Fong frowned, but not for the reason I expected. Only 10 taels. Those little brats are selling them that expensive even within our own county. Is the skin made of gold, or are the seeds made of jade? Gua couldn't help himself. So, you do realize it's expensive? Of course I do, Zhang cried out. I told them the same thing. But the guys from the Agricultural Bureau told me to take it or leave it. There are no melons anywhere else right now. These are greenhouse melons. They said the cost is high for them, too, so they're selling at cost. Fong sighed and waved a hand dismissively. Fine, fine. I get it. Zhang Biao, pay the man. Zhang Biao stepped forward. I took a sharp breath, and I felt Gua stiffen beside me. This was the man who slapped people into oblivion? Up close, he looked completely ordinary. We hadn't even noticed him standing there the whole night. With a casual flick of his sleeve, Zhang Biao tossed a heavy cloth bag onto the table. It landed with a dull, metallic thud. Check it. Exactly 500 taels. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. 500 taels of raw silver, just tucked into a sleeve? I stammered. You carry that much silver in your clothes? Zhang Biao shrugged like it was nothing. Yeah, my master carries 1,000 taels every time he goes out. I've still got another 500 in the other side. He lifted his right arm, and I could see the heavy weight of the silver pulling the fabric down. The sheer physical strength required to move naturally with that much weight was terrifying. If this man were in the army, he'd be a general capable of wielding a 100-pound mace. Why don't you carry banknotes? I asked, still staring. Silver feels more real, Zhang Biao grunted. Fong laughed at our shocked expressions. Gentlemen, let me introduce my subordinate, Zhang Biao. He's the only constable in this county, our strongest warrior, and known in the underworld as the Star of Taoyuan. Forget 1,000 taels of silver. He throws grown men around like beanbags. If you ever run into any thugs, just look for him. I gave a respectful nod, truly impressed. Master Zhang is indeed a formidable man. Zhang Biao puffed out his chest with pride. Well, Fong said, standing up, I won't see you out. If you decide to do business tomorrow, come to the yamen and find me directly. Later that night, back at the inn, I sat by the flickering candlelight. Gua stood silently by my side. I thought for a long time, my mind racing through everything I had seen. Prepare the banknotes, I said finally. We're going to the yamen tomorrow to sign the contract. I'm becoming more and more curious about this Magistrate Fong. Your Majesty, Gua whispered. Are we still going to Hengjiang Prefecture? No, I replied. We've already learned enough here. We've stayed away too long. The Crown Prince is overseeing the capital, and the court officials must be getting anxious. I let out a long sigh. I never expected it. Fong Jingyi is barely in his 20s, yet he manages a county like this. Thinking of the Crown Prince gives me a headache. He's nowhere near this level. Gua hesitated. Sire, Fong Jingyi's methods are unconventional. For a magistrate to personally conduct business, is it proper? Extraordinary times call for extraordinary people, I countered. What he has achieved here would put most officials in the empire to shame. In just 2 days, my eyes have been opened. Though, I'm still confused. What on earth is a greenhouse? Gua sniffed, clearly still annoyed. I think he's just obsessed with clever tricks and gadgets. Who pours manure on people's doorsteps? And he's tricking capital nobles into buying common tea. He even spoke to you with such disrespect just to make a sale. Enough, I snapped, my voice hardening. If clever tricks can make the people this wealthy, then I don't care. If you had even 30% of his ability, I wouldn't have such a headache. When we return, investigate his background and find out why no inspector has ever reported the truth about Taoyuan County. Gua bowed his head, looking like a kicked puppy. Yes, Your Majesty. The next morning, Xiao Tao woke Fong Jingyi up. He sat there bleary-eyed as she dressed him in his official robes. What time is it? He mumbled. Why wake me so early? It's noon, Xiao Tao said, unfazed. Those 2 merchants from the capital are waiting for you. She slapped a cold, wet towel onto his face. Fong jumped, finally fully awake. Ow, I haven't slept well in days. Can't you be a little gentler? Xiao Tao just stared at him. The man slept at least 12 hours a day. She couldn't understand how he wasn't tired of lying down. Fong grumbled to himself as he walked out. His living quarters were built right into the back of the yamen for convenience. The entire office had been renovated into something strange. Meeting rooms, mediation rooms, filing rooms. It looked more like a modern government building than a traditional court. Gua and I were waiting in a small, secluded room. It was windowless, lit by dozens of oil lamps, and perfectly soundproof. The only furniture was a long table and a few chairs. On the wall, a poem was carved in bold strokes. Fierce-browed, I coolly defy 1,000 pointing fingers. Head bowed, like a willing ox, I serve the children. On the table sat a bizarre device, a giant horn with a needle at the end, connected to a hand crank and a copper cylinder. I was staring at the poem in silence when Fong and Zhang Biao entered. Magistrate Fong, I said, turning toward him. Did you write this? No, Fong said smoothly. I found it in a fragment of an ancient book. I liked the sentiment, so I had it carved here. It's a magnificent poem, I sighed. It's a shame the rest of it is lost. I didn't realize you were a man of such literary taste, Fong noted, though he didn't seem to care much. So, have you two decided to buy the tea? I nodded. We'll take it. We hope for a smooth partnership. I believe this tea will find a great market in the capital. Once the deal is done, we'll be heading back immediately. We're leaving for the capital immediately, I said. Gu didn't hesitate. He pulled out a stack of silver notes and laid them firmly on the table in front of Fong Jingyi. Magistrate Fong, I asked, where do we collect the tea? It's already prepared, Fong replied smoothly. He gestured to his bodyguard. Zhang Biao. Zhang Biao stepped forward, unslung a heavy bundle from his back, and set it down. Inside were 20 neatly packed tea bricks, each weighing exactly 1 caddy. He also produced a small iron plaque. Here is your tea. Check the quality, Fong said, his voice casual. And take this plaque. Next time you come to Taoyuan County, fix it to your carriage. It'll guarantee you a clear path. When you need more stock, someone will find you. You won't need to see me personally. Fong then handed me 2 pieces of paper. I took them and looked them over. One was a standard business contract with the county. The other was a non-disclosure agreement. I scanned the contract first. It was fair, matching everything we discussed over drinks. But the non-disclosure agreement made me pause. Magistrate Fong, I said looking up. Why the ban on mentioning Taoyuan County to the outside world? Fong smiled thinly. It's just a temporary measure. My county is small, and our resources are limited. Our local products are in high demand, but our production capacity can't keep up. This is a way to protect your interests, too. Right now, you have the exclusive rights to sell this tea. Besides, I don't want a flood of outsiders ruining the local peace. My people are simple and honest. I'd hate for them to be corrupted by the outside world. I looked back down at the paper. One clause caught my eye. It stated that anyone who broke the agreement would suffer from mouth sores, physical weakness, night sweats, and dizziness, ending with the threat of being drowned by the spit of the Taoyuan citizens. Can we change this part? I asked, pointing at the bizarre curse. No, Fong said flatly. The final interpretation of all terms belongs to Taoyuan County. What does that even mean? Exactly what it says. I wiped a bead of sweat from my forehead. This was a predatory contract if I'd ever seen one. I didn't care about the curses, but that final interpretation line felt like a trap. Still, I needed to keep my cover. I bit my tongue, pressed my thumb into the red ink, and left my print on the page. It was a fake name, anyway. Guo watched the whole thing, his face twisting in a grimace. He looked at Fong Jingyi with a mix of horror and newfound respect. I could tell what he was thinking. Asterisk, this man would have made a terrifying eunuch. He skins people alive and they thank him for it. Asterisk. Fong picked up the contract, looking satisfied. Now, I'll need you both to read the agreement out loud. Zhang Biao, get ready. Zhang Biao moved behind me and pulled a roll of silver foil from a cabinet. He walked over to the strange horn device and began cranking a handle, wrapping the foil around a copper cylinder. What is this for? I asked, feeling a surge of suspicion. Fong took my hand with sudden warmth and led me toward the horn. Come, just speak into this. It's a local custom. Speaking into the device proves your sincerity as a partner. It's just a small ritual. On the count of 3. I had no idea what was happening, but I'd already signed the paper. I started reading the agreement aloud as Fong counted. As I spoke, Zhang Biao kept cranking. I watched closely and noticed a tiny needle at the base of the horn vibrating, etching thousands of microscopic dots into the silver foil. Once we finished, Zhang Biao removed the foil and hurried out of the room. My curiosity was burning. I desperately wanted to know what that device was, but Fong didn't give me the chance. He practically ushered us out the door. Minutes later, Guo and I were standing outside the Yamen gates, staring at each other in stunned silence. Suddenly, a carriage pulled up. "Are you two gentlemen heading back to the capital?" The driver called out cheerfully. "The magistrate ordered me to give you a lift." I felt a small wave of relief. Maybe Fong wasn't all bad. Even Guo looked impressed by the man's attention to detail. We climbed inside, ready for a smooth trip home. As soon as we sat down, the driver poked his head in with a greasy grin. "That'll be 10 taels of silver, sirs." Guo and I just stared at him. The journey back was a nightmare. A heavy rain began to fall, and as soon as we left the borders of Taoyuan County, the road turned into a swamp. The carriage got stuck in deep mud pits half a dozen times. Poor Guo had to get out and push alongside the driver. By the time we reached the outskirts of the capital, I was in a foul mood. The area was a chaotic mess of people, horses, and filth. The traffic was backed up for miles. The driver spent the whole time screaming at people to move. Suddenly, the carriage jerked violently. The driver let out a yell and tumbled off his seat, landing face first in a muddy hole. "Damn it," the driver cursed, wiping slime from his forehead. "I should have stayed in the county. This place is a hellhole." A group of beggars in rags nearby started howling with laughter at his misery. Guo frowned and tried to help the man up, but the driver had twisted his ankle and couldn't stand. The laughter around us got louder. "Forget the carriage," I said, stepping out into the rain. "We're walking." "But master," Guo protested, "it's pouring. You'll get soaked." I pointed at the road ahead, where wagons were sinking into the muck. "Does this look faster than walking? At this rate, we won't be home until tomorrow. Driver, go back." I signaled Guo to give the man 20 taels. The driver's eyes lit up, and he thanked us profusely before limping away with his horse. As we walked, I watched the carriage disappear into the distance. I found myself thinking about the roads in Taoyuan. Why were they so smooth? Why was that town so clean? This was the capital, the heart of the empire, and yet it was a disaster. The streets were narrow and winding, smelling of sewage and rot. People dumped their trash right outside their doors. I watched children playing in the filthy runoff, splashing each other with water that smelled like death. I looked toward the inner city walls, a heavy weight settling in my chest. I let out a long, tired sigh. I thought that if I united the world, lowered taxes, and eased the labor burden, the people's lives would naturally flourish. I whispered. I made it sound so simple. To think, I am far inferior to a lowly magistrate. It's laughable, truly laughable. "Your Majesty," Guo whispered urgently, trying to comfort me. "You rule the entire world. How can a tiny county even compare?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. By the time we reached the inner city, my boots were caked in filth and my clothes were heavy with rain. Guo was panting behind me, struggling under the weight of the 20 pounds of tea. I walked fast, my mind racing, while Guo cursed the mud under his breath. I had seen the future in a small mountain town, and the reality of my own capital was becoming harder to swallow. I felt a surge of relief the moment we stepped inside the inner city walls. The worst of the trek was over. Guo leaned in close, his voice a hushed whisper. "Your Majesty, there is an internal guard outpost nearby. Let me go fetch a carriage. The rest of the way will be much easier." I nodded, my eyes scanning the surroundings. Even here, in the heart of the capital, the roads were a mess. They were flatter than the mountain paths, sure, but the mud was thick and that foul, rotting stench still hung heavy in the humid air. I looked at the chaos around me and felt that familiar weight returning to my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about Taoyuan. While I was wading through filth, the Grand Secretary, Li Yin Song, was busy in the cabinet office. He and the other elders were buried under a mountain of petitions, trying to keep the empire running in my absence. Suddenly, a minor official burst into the room, gasping for air. He pulled a red envelope from his belt, his face flushed with urgency. Lordly, news of His Majesty. The ministers all froze, heads snapping up in shock. Li Yin-song dropped his brush, scrambled to his feet, and tore the envelope open. His face transformed. Gentlemen, the emperor has returned to the palace. Zheng Xiao and Zhang Dongxiang, the other university scholars, let out massive sighs of relief. He's finally back, one muttered, leaving a single letter and vanishing, leaving the crown prince in charge when the boy won't even touch state affairs. I thought we'd never see the end of this. Li Yin-song turned back to the messenger, his voice crisp. Quickly, send word to the officials heading toward Hengjiang Prefecture. Tell them they can come home. He then looked at his colleagues with a beaming smile. I'm going to have an audience with the emperor immediately. Who's coming with me? They didn't hesitate. We're coming. We're coming. The three of them rushed to the imperial study, where Guo was already waiting at the door. Please, enter, Guo said with a polite bow. His Majesty has been waiting for you for some time. They shared a nervous glance, thanked him, and hurried inside. The sight that met them was staggering. The petitions on my desk were piled up like a small mountain. They had come ready to complain about my disappearance, but seeing me buried in work silenced them. Li Yin-song was the first to find his voice. Your Majesty, why did you leave without a word? The court has been in a frenzy. I didn't look up. My brush moved steadily across the paper, marking one petition after another. I simply wanted to go for a walk, I said, my voice calm and measured. Tell me, ministers, look at these scrolls. How has the crown prince been overseeing the realm while I was away? What have my officials been doing? Li Yin-song choked on his words. He had been ready to grumble, but the mention of the crown prince turned his frustration into something else. Zheng Xiao spoke up, his voice trembling with a mix of sorrow and irritation. Your Majesty, the prince hasn't attended a single morning court session since you left. I paused. And where is he? What has he been doing? You are the senior ministers of this realm. Did you not think to restrain him? My voice was low, laced with a growing anger. It's not that we didn't try, Your Majesty, Zhang Dongxiang burst out, his face long and weary. We simply couldn't move him. One day it's a headache, the next it's his feet. He's ill every single day. We sent the imperial physicians, but they couldn't find a single thing wrong with him. He just says he's uncomfortable. Zhang Dongxiang was a hot-tempered man, and once he started, there was no stopping him. While you were away, the prince built a tiger-leopard garden in the East Palace. Instead of ruling, he spends every waking hour there, watching beasts fight. He's essentially moved his sickbed into the arena. My face darkened. My blood began to simmer. So, I said, my pulse throbbing in my temples. That rebellious son of mine has spent his days playing while the empire waits. I felt like grabbing a heavy golden mace and cracking it over his head. Li Yin-song tried to soften the blow. Well, not entirely, sire. He did visit the military camp twice. He said he was inspecting discipline and training the troops. But other than that, nothing. Fine. Fine. I was beyond furious now. I had come back expecting to see progress, only to find a mountain of ignored work and a son who treated the throne like a playground. Where is he right now? Most likely at the new tiger-leopard garden, Zhang Dongxiang said, clearly hoping I'd go down there and teach the boy a lesson. He's so obsessed with his games, he hardly looks like a future ruler. I understand. You've all worked hard. Go home and rest. We will speak more tomorrow. I turned to the eunuch standing by the door. Guo, prepare the carriage for the East Palace. At the tiger-leopard garden, a massive tiger was currently stalking two old horses. My son, Li Yuan Zhao, sat in a plush chair, watching with rapt intensity. His personal eunuch, Lu Jin, stood behind him with a face full of misery. Lu Jin knew he was in deep trouble. When I had left the prince in charge, it was supposed to be a chance for him to prove himself. Instead, the first thing the prince did was build this place and skip work. Lu Jin had been the one to tell the prince stories about tigers and leopards in the first place. He was terrified that when I found out, I'd have his skin for it. Down in the pit, the tiger lunged. It tore into the horses, disemboweling them with savage efficiency. Li Yuan Zhao sighed, looking bored. Lu, these horses are too dull. Find me another tiger. Watching two of them fight would be much more interesting. Lu Jin wiped cold sweat from his brow. Your Highness, you haven't attended court in days. The ministers are furious. When the emperor returns, how will we explain this? Let them be furious, the prince snapped. The world is at peace. What is there for me to do? Those old men in the cabinet can handle it. My only regret is that I was born a few years too late. If I had been around during the wars, I'd be galloping across the battlefield right now. He let out a long, dramatic sigh. What a waste. Lu Jin opened his mouth to speak, but his eyes suddenly went wide. He saw me walking toward them. He began to tremble, silently backing away until he was pressed against the wall. Li Yuan Zhao didn't notice. He was lost in his own world. Reading and writing. Is that what a real man does? A true man should be conquering territories. If I weren't the crown prince, I'd be the greatest general in history. It's a tragedy, really. Father already finished all the work and took all the glory. Why was he born before me? Why must I live in his shadow? A single tear actually rolled down his cheek. He looked like a misunderstood genius. Behind him, Lu Jin looked like he was about to faint. I stood right behind my son, listening to every word. I knew he was immature, but I didn't realize his heart had grown so wild. To hear him lamenting my existence? To hear him call me an obstacle to his glory? I felt a profound sense of grief. Was this the person I was supposed to hand the empire to? I leaned forward and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. I forced a thin, cold smile. Since you love fighting so much, why don't you jump down there? I think that tiger would give you a great challenge. Li Yuan Zhao froze. He knew that voice. His eyes bulged, and he slowly, stiffly turned his head. He tried to force a smile, but it looked more like a grimace. Father, you're back. I've been waiting for you. I let out a dark laugh. I heard my son has been ill for many days. I was so worried I came straight here to see you. You look quite energetic to me. I. Sweat the size of beans began to pour down his forehead. I kept smiling, but my eyes were ice. Come, my son. Walk with me. This wasn't the place for a proper conversation. The space was too cramped, and the atmosphere was wrong. I turned my back on them and started walking. It's tight in here, I said coldly. Follow me to the Imperial Garden, and bring that little eunuch with you. I walked out of the Tiger and Leopard Park without looking back. Behind me, Lu Jin was trembling so hard his teeth were chattering. He swallowed hard and leaned toward the prince, his voice cracking. Your Highness, I'm finished. I only have one final wish. Please, just help me collect my body so I can have a proper burial. Li Yuan Zhao snapped, his face twisted in a mix of fear and rage. You blind fool. Why didn't you tell me father was back? It was too fast, Lu Jin wailed, his legs turning to jelly. His Majesty arrived too quickly. I was paralyzed with fear. I can't do this, Your Highness. I can't even stand up. Li Yuan Zhao's face turned deathly pale. He felt like his short 15 years of life were flashing before his eyes. He thought about the storm that was about to break over his head and let out a violent shiver. He kicked the sobbing Lu Jin on the ground. Get up. Quickly, go get my padded jackets. Bring out my special gear. I reached the Imperial Garden first. I sat in the pavilion, my face a mask of stone. In my left hand, I held a thick, heavy wooden staff. In my right, I gripped a long leather whip. I had specifically ordered these from the armory, the most durable, painful sizes they had. I gave the staff a test swing, shattering a stone balustrade with a single crack. Then I flicked the whip, slicing a tree branch clean off. The power was still there. My strength hadn't faded with age. There was an old saying, a stick produces a filial son. I had tried everything else. I gave him the best teachers in the world and the finest environment, but he had still grown into a crooked weed. I had suspected his behavior was getting out of hand, but I thought he was just being lively. I trusted his tutors and the cabinet ministers to polish him into a leader. I never expected him to be this rotten. At 15, I was already on the front lines, killing enemies and earning military merit. My son, he was 15 and only knew how to play with cats and dogs. He was a parasite. He wasn't even fit to carry the shoes of that magistrate in Taiyuan. If I didn't show him who was in charge today, he'd think his father was a toothless tiger. A wave of cold fury washed over me. I was going to beat the rebellion out of this animal. A few minutes later, Li Yuan Zhao crept into the garden. Lu Jin followed behind, gasping for air like a fish out of water. I looked up and narrowed my eyes. My son looked whiter. He looked like he had gained 20 pounds in the last 10 minutes. He walked toward me with a pathetic, innocent expression on his face. This was his trick. Usually, he was bold and lawless, but the moment he smelled punishment, he put on this poor me act. In the past, my love for him let him slide. Not today. He had dared to mess around while he was supposed to be overseeing the state. If I spoiled him any longer, he'd try to flip the sky upside down. Lu Jin was even worse. His legs were shaking so violently it looked like he was dancing, and tears were swirling in his eyes, ready to pour out at any second. I didn't say a word. I just stared at them with ice in my veins. Li Yuan Zhao swallowed hard, his head bowed low. Lu Jin knelt beside him, trying to bury his face in the dirt. The silence stretched on until it became unbearable. Finally, Li Yuan Zhao risked a glance upward. He met my murderous gaze and instantly collapsed into a full prostrate bow. "Your son deserves 10,000 deaths," he stammered. The garden went deathly silent. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. The only sound was Lu Jin's heavy, panicked breathing. I could see Li Yuan Zhao gritting his teeth, likely cursing his servant for breathing so loud and drawing my attention. Finally, I spoke. I didn't scream. My voice was eerily calm. "The prince wants to be a general? You said I stole all your glory? Fine. You and I will have a little contest today." I tossed the heavy staff across the stone floor. It clattered and bounced, landing right in front of his knees. Li Yuan Zhao turned white. Sweat poured down his face in giant beads. I am no match for father," he whispered, trembling. "I am still small. I am still growing." I was stunned. Not only was he bold and lazy, but he had also become utterly shameless. My face darkened. "It seems the prince really is ill," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "To wear so many clothes in this weather. You must be freezing." Li Yuan Zhao jumped at the excuse. Yes, I've caught a terrible cold today. I'm very sensitive to the chill." I suddenly lashed the whip through the air. Crack! The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Someone, strip this animal's clothes off. Let me see how sick he is." The guards hesitated for a second, then stepped forward. Li Yuan Zhao tried to resist, but one look at my face told him he had no choice. He moved like a snail, slowly peeling off his outer layers. Underneath his robe was a thick, padded jacket. He took that off. Underneath was another one. Then another. He had layered 4 heavy jackets over his thin white undershirt. As he pulled off the last layer, a thick iron plate fell out and hit the stone floor with a loud clang. I stared at the metal plate, speechless. Li Yuan Zhao dropped his head in shame. "The pants too," I growled. "Strip them all." Reluctantly, he began to shed his trousers. After 2 layers, a pair of iron butt protectors fell out. Then came iron knee pads. Then more iron plating for his thighs. The clatter-clank of metal hitting the ground sounded like a blacksmith shop. I exploded. "You animal. You absolute brat. You spend all your time on these little tricks instead of learning? Do you want to kill me with anger?" I stood up, gripping the whip. "Since the day you were born, you've had the best of everything. I fought and bled to win this empire, so you would never have to know the horrors of war. I didn't ask you to be a genius. I just asked you to be a man who could hold what I built.